And the thing is, this man had every right not to want to go through with marrying me after telling him everything that I told him, hiding this the entire time during our dating relationship. Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine. I was addicted to the little kava kratom tonics that are sold in gas stations in the little blue bottles. If you know, you know. If you're unfamiliar with kratom, it bonds to your opioid receptors, which can be highly addictive. I was drinking 9 to 12 bottles a day of these tonics, and I've been sober for the past almost 2 years. Let's talk about a question that I get all the time, which is how do I tell my spouse about my kratom addiction? Now, this is a very scary question because a lot of us, including myself, were keeping this from our partners or our spouses until things got really, really bad. First, I'm going to give some background on my own story. So I was taking kratom the entire time that my husband and I were dating. We dated for about 7 months before we got married. But when we first started dating, I was taking probably 1 to 3 bottles a day, still very much in denial about what these things were doing to me. I didn't do any other substances. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink, nothing. So not great at first, but not completely unmanageable. And honestly, it was something that was really easy to hide. At first, I truly had no malicious intent, and it was something that was really easy to justify, to be in denial about. But when I look back on it, I think my subconscious knew that these things were not good because I never told anyone I was drinking them. If they were completely innocent, I probably would have just casually mentioned it in conversation to my husband, to my friends, but that never really came up. In my mind, I was like, I don't want anyone to raise false alarms for no reason at all, so I'm just keeping my mouth shut. I was also really scared to tell my husband at the time because I was really nervous that sober Jasmine would not be as loved or accepted as kratom Jasmine. I always had a deep fear about being accepted by men in general and needing some sort of liquid courage to be able to have conversations and to be able to feel good and lovable. Fast forward to the weekend that we got engaged. This is March of 2024. My addiction was at its worst, and I think something actually clicked that weekend, telling me that, this man has always been so wonderful to me. He's always been so honest, so loyal. I cannot go into a marriage without telling him the truth. And so we got engaged. My mom was staying with me that weekend over at my apartment. It was a surprise visit, so I was in no way, shape, or form prepared for someone to come stay at my apartment. It was messy. There were bottles I had to hide. And I was really nervous about having to dose while she was there and timing things out to where she wouldn't find out. I'll post a whole video about my detox journey, but this video is not about that. So I'll get into all of that later and how I detoxed, all the details and everything. My mom's there. I start detoxing. I decide to just not take any more fuel freeze. And mind you, my mom and my husband both thought I had some weird undiagnosed illness because they didn't know about my addiction. I just started getting really sick and they were super worried about me. On the second day of my detox, I had this really overwhelming conviction from the Lord to open up to everybody closest to me about my addiction. And that was really scary because I didn't know how they were going to respond, but I knew that the Lord was telling me to do this. So my mom's in person with me. My husband's over at his apartment, and I didn't want him to see me detox. So I told him, you don't need to come over. He had offered to bring me things, come over and take care of me, but I was just there with my mom. So I come out of my bathroom and I sit my mom down and I tell her literally everything about the addiction. I tell her how many bottles I'd been taking a day, how much money I had spent, which was a lot of money. And she was just so kind and so gracious and so accepting of me, and was actually relieved because she thought I had some weird sickness that they couldn't pinpoint. So right after I tell my mom, I decide to call my husband. So I call him and I tell him everything as well. What kratom is, how many shots I was taking, how much money I spent. Again, everything I had told my mom. And the thing is, this man had every right not to want to go through with marrying me after telling him everything that I told him, hiding this the entire time during our dating relationship. But I was willing to take the chance of losing him and coming clean rather than entering into a marriage and keeping this secret for as long as I possibly could, which probably wouldn't have been very long because it would have come out eventually. He had a really gracious response, which I understand that does not happen with everyone. And I think he was just grateful that I told him before I actually got caught and didn't end up confessing it. He never once made me feel guilty or condemned, and he also didn't enable me at the same time. Like I said, I've been sober for almost 2 years now from Feel Free. By the grace of God, I have not relapsed. So I'm going to tell you guys some advice that I have about telling your spouses or your partners about your kratom addiction. Things that I learned and maybe things I would have done differently. The first thing I actually would have done differently is have the conversation with my husband in person. Remember, I called him and it was really out of the blue. I did not give him really enough space to be able to process the information that I was giving him. So I probably would have told him beforehand, hey, I want to open up to you about something. Can we set aside some space to chat and to talk this through, maybe even a couple of hours, so you can fully understand what it is that I'm dealing with? And I think that's just overall good marriage advice. At least what I've learned in the last almost 2 years of marriage is that it is so important to be able to have time for these conversations, because they're really big ones. And when you catch someone out of the blue, you don't really know how they're going to respond necessarily. Luckily, my husband was really sweet and gracious, but when I called him, he was also going through some other stressful things, and I was kind of adding on top of what he was already dealing with. So I wish I would have made maybe a little bit more space for him to be able to process that fully. There's never really a good time to drop this bomb on anyone, but you can control the space that you tell them in, and being a little bit more gentle about it. The second piece of advice that I have is, when you tell your spouse or your partner, don't leave any stone unturned. You need to tell them literally everything, and don't try to cover up little small white lies. Lay the truth completely out. The longer you keep this from your spouse, the worse it's going to get. I can absolutely promise you that. The last thing you want to do is tell like a little half truth, maybe not be as honest about how many bottles you were taking, and then it comes out later and it's just a whole mess, and you're not regaining trust or rebuilding that trust back. When we practice radical honesty in recovery, it creates so much healing. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was a really dishonest person in the past. I'm not just talking about my kratom addiction, but in confessing my addiction fully to my husband, it has made me a more honest person, and I'm more quick to confess other things too to him that need to come out. And that's so beneficial for our relationship, for our marriage, just so many different aspects. Confession can be incredibly painful and scary in the moment, but guys, I promise you it is worth it. And this includes being honest about how much money you spent. If you need to show bank statements, you need to show loans you took out. I took out this really sketchy, like, quick cash loan. I was honest about that. Show them everything and be really honest about the money that you're spending. My third piece of advice, which I think is arguably one of the most important aspects of this, is to educate your spouse on what kratom actually is and the severity of this addiction. I think at first maybe my husband didn't understand what kratom really was. Like, a lot of people don't understand what it is, what Feel Free is. A lot of people think it's like an energy drink, and he had initially thought I was like addicted to caffeine or like this little energy drink, but no, it's an like substance, and the addiction should be taken extremely seriously. Show them Reddit forums, show them news articles, heck, show them my page, my videos. Educate your spouse or your partner on what this substance really is, especially if you're someone who used this to get off of like stimulants or as an alcohol alternative to help you like live a healthier lifestyle, because that's what the product I was addicted to was marketed as something that was healthy for sober people. So a lot of people went into this very innocently. There are now so many resources for you to be able to educate your partner or your spouse about what this addiction is. My last piece of advice is kind of more of an action step for after you tell your spouse, but take accountability and put some steps into place to actually recover and get better. You know, confession is great, but what's going to be your next step? Make sure you get into meetings, you're in community, you're rebuilding that trust and really showing them that you're serious about getting better. Getting in the community outside of your marriage is going to be absolutely key here. Your spouse cannot be an emotional crutch for you while you're walking through this. You need community, you need support, you need other people. When I got sober, I immediately started going to NA meetings, AA meetings, and then started getting involved in my church's recovery ministry. So this has been so helpful, not just for my own recovery journey, but also for my marriage. To sum it all up, I know this is a very, very difficult conversation to have, but once you have it, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off and you're on the journey to recovery. That's not to say there are not things to repair, trust to rebuild. It can be a very, very long and tedious journey, but I promise you that this is the right thing to do. If you feel these videos are beneficial to your kratom sobriety journey, please like and subscribe. I'll be posting so many more videos here. I'm really excited to get this channel going, but yeah, I love you guys and thank you for tuning in.